The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the city courthouse, casting long shadows across the polished wooden benches. The large room was filled with a mixture of anticipation, anxiety, and quiet tension. Lawyers shuffled papers nervously, reporters whispered into their recorders, and the occasional sound of a gavel echoed as the court clerk moved about. At the front, the judge, a stern but fair woman in her 50s, sat behind her elevated bench, reviewing notes with furrowed brows. Today's case involved a serious theft investigation that had kept the community on edge for weeks, and the courtroom reflected the gravity of the situation. Among the sea of adults, one small figure sat quietly, barely noticeable at first glance. On her mother's lap, 3-year-old Emily clutched a small stuffed bunny, her wide, curious eyes darting between the people and the proceedings. Unlike the adults, her mind was not preoccupied with legal arguments or the tension in the room. Instead, she was captivated by the world around her in a way only a child could be, observing, noticing, and quietly absorbing details that others overlooked. Her tiny fingers fidgeted with the soft fabric of her toy, while her toes dangled above the floor, swinging back and forth in rhythm with her excitement. At the front of the room, near the prosecutor's table, sat a figure that immediately caught Emily's attention. It was Rex, a German Shepherd police dog with a muscular build and an intelligent, alert gaze. He wore a black K9 vest that gleamed under the overhead lights, and a shiny badge reflected off the polished courtroom floor. Beside him, Officer Daniels, a seasoned police handler with a calm demeanor and sharp eyes, stood at attention. Together, they formed a silent, formidable duo, trained to respond to danger in a matter of seconds. Yet to Emily, Rex didn't look intimidating at all. He seemed majestic, almost like a guardian of the courtroom, quietly observing every movement. Emily's mother, a gentle woman named Sarah, adjusted her daughter on her lap, unaware of the profound impact this day would have. "Sit still, Emily," she whispered softly, brushing a strand of hair from the little girl's forehead. Emily nodded but didn't look away from Rex, whose eyes flicked occasionally in her direction. There was something about the dog's presence that seemed to resonate with her, a quiet reassurance she could not articulate. While the courtroom buzzed with adult tension, Emily's attention remained steadfast on the dog. She tilted her head slightly, whispering a soft hello under her breath, a greeting only she seemed to understand. The trial began in earnest, with the prosecutor laying out the details of the theft case. Words like evidence, witness, and testimony filled the air, but Emily's ears seemed to filter them out. Her gaze remained fixed on Rex, whose posture was impeccable, ears twitching in response to the ambient sounds of the room, the shuffle of papers, the soft murmurs of the gallery, the distant hum of the air conditioning. It was fascinating to Emily how the dog could remain so calm and composed while the humans around him seemed anxious and restless. She reached out a tiny hand, as if to touch him, but hesitated, knowing instinctively that this was a serious place. From the corner of the room, Officer Daniels noticed the little girl's fascination. He offered a subtle nod of acknowledgement, kneeling slightly to ensure she wasn't intimidated by his imposing figure. Emily's eyes lit up at the gesture, her fingers tightening around her bunny. She felt an unexpected sense of comfort, an unspoken connection between her and Rex. There was a quiet energy in the air, almost imperceptible, that seemed to shift as the child's innocence brushed against the formality of the courtroom. For a brief moment, the tension in the room softened, unnoticed by most adults, but very much sensed by those attuned to subtler cues. As the judge called the first witness to the stand, Emily continued to watch Rex closely. She noticed how he shifted slightly, just enough to keep alert without disturbing anyone. The precision of his movements fascinated her. "He's so brave," she whispered to her mother, who smiled and nodded but remained focused on the proceedings. Emily's eyes followed every twitch of Rex's ears, every glance he threw toward Officer Daniels. In her mind, he was no longer a police dog. He was a protector, a silent hero observing the humans who seemed far more chaotic than he ever could be. Emily's mother attempted to engage her with small distractions, a soft squeeze of the hand, a gentle word, but Emily's attention was unwavering. She noticed the way Rex's fur gleamed under the bright courtroom lights, the sharp definition of his eyes, and the rhythm of his breathing as he remained perfectly still. Each subtle detail fascinated her, and she seemed to absorb the calmness he projected. In a world that suddenly felt heavy and complex, Rex represented a steady presence, a constant she could focus on. Even the sounds of the gavel or the low murmurs of lawyers did not disturb her. The spectators around Emily were mostly oblivious to her silent interaction with the dog. Lawyers argued over evidence, witnesses described events with precision, and the judge listened intently, yet a quiet drama was unfolding in the middle of the room. A 3-year-old girl and a police dog, connected without words, creating a bridge between innocence and duty. The subtle energy shift did not escape Officer Daniels, who made a mental note of the child's fascination, recognizing a rare sensitivity in someone so young. Rex, for his part, seemed to sense the curiosity and responded with the gentlest flick of his ears. Time passed slowly with Emily's gaze unwavering. Each glance at Rex was met with calm acknowledgement, a silent understanding that something special was happening. Her mother began to realize that this was more than casual interest. "Look at him," Sarah whispered, more to herself than to Emily. The connection was palpable, though no one else yet noticed. The courtroom's tension remained high, but within this small bubble of attention, a quiet warmth began to grow. It was a moment of innocence intersecting with duty, and its impact was only beginning to reveal itself. As the morning session continued, Emily's mind wandered in wonder. She imagined Rex running through fields, chasing imaginary villains, and standing watch over the people around him. The courtroom walls faded in importance compared to the silent hero beside the officer. In that moment, Emily's presence and Rex's calmness seemed to balance each other, creating an unexpected harmony in the midst of seriousness. For those few minutes, a 3-year-old's fascination brought light to a room otherwise dominated by tension, setting the stage for something remarkable that no one in that courtroom would ever forget. The courtroom continued its proceedings, the sound of legal arguments echoing off the high ceilings. Lawyers' voices were sharp, their words precise, as they navigated through testimony and evidence. Witnesses recounted events with meticulous detail, and the judge's gavel punctuated points of emphasis. The room was filled with the weight of law and order, but amid it all, Emily's attention remained entirely on Rex, the police dog sitting near Officer Daniels. Her little body leaned slightly forward on her mother's lap, tiny hands clasped around the worn plush bunny she had brought with her. She was transfixed, mesmerized by the way he seemed to command the room without moving a muscle. Emily studied Rex's every feature with remarkable focus. His fur glinted in the sunlight that streamed through the tall windows, each hair catching the light and forming a halo around his alert silhouette. She noticed the faint scar above his left eye, a mark of past experience, and it made him seem even more heroic in her eyes. To her, the courtroom's seriousness and the adults' tension faded into the background. All that existed in her world at that moment was Rex, the way his ears twitched in response to distant sounds, the gentle curve of his tail, the intensity in his eyes as they scanned the room. She whispered to her mother, "He's listening." Sarah smiled down at her, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's forehead. "Yes, sweetheart, he's very good at paying attention," she replied softly, careful not to interrupt the proceedings. But Emily's fascination went deeper than curiosity. There was a quiet sense of recognition, as if she could intuitively understand Rex's role in the room. She felt a strange reassurance from him, a protective energy that contrasted sharply with the anxiety that permeated the courtroom. While the adults debated guilt and innocence, Emily sensed that this dog was different, special. Officer Daniels noticed her gaze and allowed himself a small smile. He had seen many children interact with K-9 units, but few were as focused or as gentle as Emily. There was an unspoken respect that passed between them. Rex, trained to remain calm in all situations, seemed almost to acknowledge her interest, his posture perfect, his eyes alert yet relaxed. It was rare for a young child to captivate a K-9's attention, and Daniels made a mental note to observe the connection quietly. He adjusted his stance, allowing a subtle angle that put Emily within Rex's line of sight without disrupting the courtroom. Emily's mind wandered in wonder. She imagined Rex on duty, chasing down thieves or searching for missing persons, his senses sharp and instincts unparalleled. She imagined herself standing beside him, a tiny partner in his adventures, sharing a world of courage and loyalty that no adult could fully understand. The seriousness of the courtroom, the gravity of the trial, it all seemed distant and irrelevant compared to the silent hero beside the officer. She reached out an imaginary hand toward him, hoping he could sense her admiration. Her mother noticed Emily's intensity and whispered, "Be careful, Emily, sit nicely." But her daughter's attention was unwavering. She tilted her head slightly, observing every subtle movement. Rex shifted his weight, a slight adjustment of his paws, and Emily gasped softly, delighting in his controlled precision. To her, he was not just a dog. He was a guardian, a sentinel who could navigate the dangers of the world with ease and confidence. It fascinated her that he could remain so disciplined while surrounded by so much human chaos. The adults in the courtroom remained oblivious to this quiet drama. Lawyers argued evidence, witnesses recounted stories with painstaking detail, and the judge made notes with a serious expression. Yet the energy of the room subtly shifted, though few noticed. Emily's focus on Rex created a gentle ripple, a quiet reminder of innocence amidst complexity. A clerk passing by gave a slight nod to Officer Daniels, sensing the calm presence Rex exuded. Even in a high-stakes environment, there existed this small bubble of peace and fascination, anchored by a 3-year-old's attention. Emily's imagination ran wild. She pictured Rex outside the courtroom, leaping over fences, sprinting across parks, and responding to Officer Daniels' commands with flawless precision. She imagined him protecting people, keeping them safe, and somehow sensing the unspoken feelings of those around him. In her mind, he was invincible yet gentle, brave yet kind, a combination that filled her young heart with admiration and comfort. She pressed closer to her mother, not in fear, but to feel safer knowing that such a noble creature existed in the world. Time passed slowly yet quickly in a child's mind. Each moment spent observing Rex was an adventure. Emily noted the subtle details, the shine of his eyes, the slight tilt of his head, the way his tail flicked when a sudden noise startled him. She watched how he responded to Officer Daniels' subtle gestures, sensing a dialogue that adults could not see. In that moment, Emily felt part of something larger, an unspoken connection that bridged age, species, and understanding. It was as though she recognized his purpose, without fully knowing how or why. Emily's mother, Sarah, began to notice the depth of her daughter's focus. "She really likes him," she whispered to a friend sitting nearby. The friend nodded, smiling. "Children notice things we miss. She sees more than just a dog. She sees courage, maybe." Sarah thought about it for a moment and realized it was true. Emily was responding not just to Rex's appearance but to his aura, his presence. Even in a place dominated by rules and procedures, a child's instincts could detect kindness, loyalty, and strength. Officer Daniels continued to observe quietly, impressed by Emily's connection with Rex. Over the years, he had trained countless dogs and handled many children, but rarely had he seen such unspoken understanding between the two. He noted how Rex's ears twitched more frequently when Emily moved, how his tail subtly responded to her presence. There was an almost magical quality to the interaction, a reminder of the deep bond humans could form with dogs, especially with those trained to serve and protect. By the time the morning session reached a short recess, Emily had not moved from her position, eyes locked on Rex. The courtroom, filled with tension and anticipation, seemed to soften around her. Adults whispered quietly, focused on strategy and procedure, but Emily's presence reminded everyone that there was more to the world than arguments and testimony. In her small, innocent way, she had become a silent anchor, drawing attention to a gentle hero whose importance transcended his official role. As Emily clutched her bunny tightly, she whispered again, almost inaudibly, "Good dog." Though no one else heard her, the words were sincere, carrying a weight far beyond her 3 years. Rex shifted slightly, his gaze meeting hers for a brief moment, almost acknowledging her praise. That tiny interaction, imperceptible to most, set the stage for something extraordinary, a moment that would transform a tense courtroom into a space of warmth, laughter, and human-animal connection. Even as the adults returned to legal arguments after the break, Emily remained focused. She watched Rex with unwavering attention, absorbing every detail and interaction. She did not understand the complexities of the law or the seriousness of the trial, but she understood what mattered: kindness, trust, and the quiet heroism represented by the police dog before her. That morning, in a crowded courtroom, a 3-year-old girl began forging a connection that no one would forget, a connection that would soon surprise everyone in ways no one expected. The courtroom had settled into a rhythm after the brief recess. Lawyers adjusted their papers, witnesses were sworn in, and the judge tapped her gavel lightly, signaling the continuation of proceedings. The atmosphere was heavy with seriousness. The case had garnered significant attention, and every word spoken carried weight. Adults around Emily whispered in hushed tones, discussing strategy, past testimonies, and legal intricacies. Yet, amid the dense fog of professional tension, one small observer remained entirely focused elsewhere. 3-year-old Emily had barely moved during the break. She sat upright, her small fingers wrapped tightly around her stuffed bunny, eyes locked on Rex, the police dog who had become the silent hero of her day. While adults debated and argued, Emily's mind was alive with curiosity and wonder. She noticed the subtle ways Rex responded to Officer Daniel's cues: the tilt of a head, the slight movement of a paw, the calm yet alert gaze that swept across the room. To Emily, he was no longer a background figure or part of the courtroom decor. He was alive, aware, and extraordinary. Emily leaned slightly forward, shifting her weight as she studied Rex's posture. The K9 sat with perfect discipline, tail resting quietly, ears poised to detect any sound, yet there was a softness in his gaze that drew Emily in. She had seen many dogs before, but none captivated her like this. It was as if Rex carried a wisdom far beyond what anyone else in the room could grasp. Her tiny brow furrowed in concentration as she considered him, as if trying to communicate silently with this guardian, who seemed to exist in a realm between playfulness and duty. The trial moved on, and the prosecutor called the next witness. The woman, nervous and hesitant, recounted details about the case, but Emily barely registered her words. Her focus remained steadfast, eyes following every subtle twitch of Rex's ears, the slight adjustment of his stance, and the way he calmly scanned the room, fully aware of the human drama unfolding around him. To Emily, Rex was more than a dog. He was a presence, a protector, a being that understood without words what was happening and how to remain composed amidst chaos. Minutes passed, and Emily's fascination deepened. She imagined a story in her mind: Rex leaping across rooftops, sniffing out clues, standing tall and brave while protecting those who could not protect themselves. Her imagination painted him as a hero of epic proportions, yet she knew he was also gentle, aware of those around him, and capable of understanding emotions in ways humans sometimes overlooked. Emily's fingers tightened around her bunny, her knuckles white with excitement and anticipation. She wanted to reach out to him, to let him know she saw his bravery, even if no one else did. It was then, in a quiet moment between testimonies, that Emily made a decision. Her tiny hand rose slowly, almost instinctively, pointing directly at Rex. The room seemed to pause. Lawyers froze mid-sentence, the judge's pen hovered over her notes, and spectators instinctively turned their attention toward the unexpected action. Emily's mother gasped softly, startled but not alarmed. She leaned forward, brushing Emily's hair from her face, whispering, "Emily, what are you doing?" But Emily's gaze never wavered. Her focus was absolute, unwavering. All eyes followed the tiny finger tracing the line from Emily to Rex. The courtroom was silent, save for the low hum of air conditioning and the shuffle of papers. Whispers erupted quietly among the spectators. Is she pointing at the dog? What does she want? Does she know what she's doing? The tension, which had been heavy moments before, shifted into something else, curiosity. No one could have anticipated the next moment. Emily's lips moved, forming two words that would soon ripple through the courtroom and beyond. "Good boy." The words, soft yet deliberate, carried an innocence and authority only a child could possess. The simple praise echoed through the room, reaching the ears of Rex. The K9's head tilted slightly, ears perking up. His tail flicked in response, subtle but deliberate. Officer Daniels, experienced and composed, allowed a small smile to break through his stoic exterior. He leaned closer, whispering to Emily's mother, "He hears her. He understands." The effect on the courtroom was immediate. Laughter bubbled softly from the back rows, smiles spread across tense faces, and the judge herself allowed a rare, gentle smile to cross her features. The atmosphere, once heavy with legal complexity and anxiety, softened in a way no one could have predicted. Adults whispered among themselves, amazed at the innocence and simplicity of the moment. A 3-year-old had managed to diffuse tension in a room filled with adults focused entirely on serious matters. Emily's mother, Sarah, felt a swell of pride and warmth. She reached down, gently squeezing her daughter's hand, whispering, "You see, he likes that, doesn't he?" Emily's eyes sparkled as she nodded, still pointing slightly at Rex, fully aware that her words had reached him. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a pure, unfiltered connection between the child and the dog. For those watching closely, it was almost magical. The seriousness of the courtroom faded for a brief moment, replaced by an undeniable display of human-animal connection. Even the reporters in the room noticed the shift. Cameras clicked softly, trying not to disrupt proceedings, and some journalists scribbled notes, aware they had witnessed something special. Emily's gesture, paired with her simple words, was more than a cute anecdote. It was a reminder of the unexpected ways innocence could influence even the most formal and structured environments. The story was being quietly written in that moment, one that would captivate the city and later the nation. Rex, trained for alertness, responded in a subtle but unmistakable way. His ears twitched toward Emily, his eyes meeting hers briefly, and his posture seemed to relax, as if acknowledging the praise. Officer Daniels, watching closely, marveled at the bond forming in real time. He knew that K9 units could sense emotions, but few had ever witnessed such an immediate and profound interaction between a child and a police dog in a public, high-stakes setting. Emily, unaware of the significance of the moment, simply felt joy and a sense of accomplishment. Whispers of amazement continued to ripple through the courtroom. Lawyers paused, witnesses glanced toward the small girl, and even the judge, a veteran of countless trials, seemed momentarily softened by the scene. A ripple of warmth spread throughout the room, an invisible thread connecting everyone to the innocence of Emily and the quiet dignity of Rex. It was a moment that transcended the trial itself, reminding all present that amidst the seriousness of life, there were simple acts that could touch hearts universally. Emily's 2 words, so unassuming yet so powerful, marked a turning point. In that instant, she had transformed the atmosphere of the courtroom, reminding adults of values often forgotten in the pursuit of logic and order: kindness, recognition, and the subtle power of empathy. For Rex, the acknowledgement brought a calmness that had been absent moments before, a gentle shift in his demeanor that reflected trust and connection. For Emily, it was a triumph, a moment of understanding that extended far beyond words. By the time the trial resumed, the courtroom felt lighter. Adults carried on with arguments and testimonies, but an invisible warmth lingered. Emily's focus remained on Rex, though now there was a sense of mutual recognition. She occasionally whispered soft words of praise or encouragement, and each time Rex responded with subtle gestures, A flick of his tail, a slight shift of his posture, a glance that acknowledged her presence. What had begun as fascination had grown into connection, and connection into a quiet, unspoken friendship. Even the judge, often impervious to outside influence, noticed the change. She paused occasionally, glancing at Emily and Rex, and allowed herself a faint smile that went unnoticed by most adults. Somewhere between innocence and duty, between a child's curiosity and a dog's training, a bridge had formed, a bridge that no law or protocol could define, yet everyone in the room intuitively understood its significance. It was the kind of moment that would linger in memory long after the trial concluded. As the morning session drew to a close, Emily remained seated, still captivated by Rex. Her mother whispered a few encouraging words, brushing Emily's hair from her eyes, while Officer Daniels crouched slightly, offering a nod of acknowledgement. The bond between child and dog, forged in these quiet minutes, had created a sense of calm, wonder, and delight that no courtroom procedure could replicate. It was clear that this simple, spontaneous gesture would not be forgotten by the participants, by the media, and eventually by the wider public who would hear the story. The moment Emily whispered, "Good boy," a ripple of astonishment spread through the courtroom. For a split second, the room seemed suspended in time, every adult frozen, caught between surprise and wonder. Lawyers paused mid-argument, witnesses faltered slightly in their recounting, and even the judge's hand, poised over her pen, lingered in mid-air. The silence was profound, a stark contrast to the low hum of tension that had dominated the room just moments before. No one expected a 3-year-old's words to carry such weight, yet somehow they did. Rex's response was subtle but undeniable. His ears twitched, and his head tilted ever so slightly, as if to acknowledge the small voice that had praised him. His tail, previously resting in quiet stillness, flicked in response, a delicate yet powerful gesture that communicated understanding and recognition. Officer Daniels, ever attentive to his partner's behavior, allowed a small smile to cross his face. Years of training and countless deployments had taught him to read every nuance of Rex's behavior, but this interaction was extraordinary. Emily's simple words had touched something deeper than commands or routine praise. They had created a genuine connection. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, whispering among themselves, unsure of how to react. Some chuckled softly, enchanted by the innocence of the moment. Others were struck by the unexpected emotional depth of the interaction. "Did you see that?" one whispered. "The dog," he really responded. Another nodded, smiling, realizing that they were witnessing something more than a cute scene. They were witnessing an unspoken bond forming in real time. Even the journalists in the gallery paused to scribble notes, knowing they had stumbled upon a story that transcended routine courtroom reporting. Emily's mother, Sarah, felt a warmth rise in her chest. She watched her daughter's tiny face beam with pride and satisfaction. "Yes, he likes that," she whispered gently, brushing Emily's hair from her eyes. Emily's eyes sparkled, her small hand still pointing subtly at Rex, fingers trembling slightly with excitement. In that moment there was no fear, no hesitation, only an unfiltered display of pure, innocent joy. Sarah marveled at how a child so small could command attention and create such an impact without even realizing the broader implications. The judge, a veteran of countless trials, leaned back slightly in her chair. For the first time that morning, a faint smile tugged at her lips. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but those who were observant noticed the softening of her gaze. Even in a courtroom dominated by rules, procedure, and tension, the simplicity of a child's praise could pierce the formality and remind everyone of the humanity at the center of the proceedings. For a fleeting moment, the weight of the trial seemed lighter, the air almost warmer, infused with the innocence of Emily's gesture. Officer Daniels continued to monitor Rex closely. The dog's reaction was a combination of trained alertness and genuine engagement. He had been through countless situations that demanded precision and discipline, yet nothing had prepared him for this. A child's unprompted praise in the midst of a serious courtroom. Rex's slight tail flick, the soft lift of his ears, and the attentive focus of his eyes were a testament to the deep bond that could exist between humans and dogs. He seemed to understand that Emily's words were genuine, heartfelt, and full of admiration. The spectators' reactions grew more animated. A few whispered stories of their own pets, recalling the way dogs could sense emotions, the unspoken loyalty and understanding they displayed. Others discussed the significance of the moment, realizing that Emily's innocence had reminded them of something often overlooked: the power of small gestures, the universality of kindness, and the connection that could form between beings who did not need words to communicate. The courtroom, once dominated by tension, was now alive with subtle energy, curiosity, warmth, and a shared sense of delight. Emily, oblivious to the effect she had caused, continued to watch Rex with rapt attention. Her mind swirled with imagination and fascination. She imagined him as a guardian, a protector of people in need, a hero who could sense fear, sadness, and bravery all at once. Her tiny chest swelled with admiration, and she whispered another quiet "good boy," her voice full of sincerity. Rex's ears flicked once more, his tail brushing the polished floor. Officer Daniels gave a gentle nod, as if silently thanking Emily for her recognition. In the gallery, journalists quietly snapped photos, capturing the precise moment of connection. Social media would later buzz with the image of a 3-year-old girl pointing at a police dog in a formal courtroom, praising him with 2 small words that carried an extraordinary weight. The story would be shared across the city and eventually nationwide, touching hearts with the simplicity and purity of the act. What began as an innocent gesture had evolved into a symbol of hope, trust, and unexpected joy. Even the trial participants felt the change. Witnesses recounted their statements with slightly lighter voices. Lawyers maintained their composure but seemed to soften when glancing at the small observer, and the judge continued with proceedings, but allowed moments of pause, subtle acknowledgement of the human element that Emily had so unexpectedly highlighted. The case, though serious, was now marked by a fleeting yet powerful demonstration of innocence and the quiet influence of empathy. Officer Daniels knelt slightly, careful not to intrude, allowing Rex to maintain focus on Emily. He whispered softly to his partner, a series of subtle commands that ensured Rex remained calm yet attentive. The dog's training, coupled with his natural intelligence, allowed him to respond not only to explicit orders but also to emotional cues. Emily, in her pure and unfiltered way, had given Rex a cue he had never encountered, a spontaneous act of admiration. The effect was profound, a perfect illustration of the unique connection humans and dogs could share. As the morning session moved toward another recess, Emily's influence lingered. She had shifted the energy of the courtroom, subtly yet powerfully. Adults exchanged quiet smiles, reporters scribbled notes, and even those not directly involved in the case felt a warmth that had not been present earlier. Emily's gaze remained on Rex, unwavering, as though she were silently communicating with him in ways beyond comprehension. The small gesture had blossomed into a moment that everyone sensed was extraordinary, though few could articulate why. By the time the recess was called, whispers filled the room. "That child, she's remarkable," someone murmured. Another nodded, adding, "And the dog, he's incredible. Look at how he responded." Sarah held Emily close, her heart full of pride. Emily, unaware of her growing fame and the subtle shifts in adult perception, simply felt joy in knowing that Rex had understood her words. It was pure, unfiltered happiness, and it radiated outward, touching everyone in the room. Those quiet moments, Emily and Rex formed a bond that went beyond the confines of the courtroom. She had learned instinctively that praise and recognition carried meaning, that her words could influence even the most disciplined of creatures. Rex had demonstrated that attentiveness and calm could create space for trust, even in an environment brimming with tension. Together, they had created a moment that balanced innocence with duty, imagination with reality, and admiration with professional respect. As the courtroom staff returned to their seats, Emily whispered once more, almost inaudibly, "Good boy." Rex's tail flicked slightly in acknowledgement, his eyes holding hers just long enough for a sense of mutual understanding to form. It was a simple exchange, yet it carried weight far beyond the room. This was a moment of connection, a testament to the power of empathy, and a reminder that even in structured, serious environments, a small gesture could ripple outward, touching hearts in ways words alone could not. By the end of the session, Emily's act had become the story of the morning. Lawyers whispered about it, officers shared it quietly, and the judge carried the memory forward, subtly softening the proceedings without consciously realizing it. What began as a child's innocent gesture had become a symbol, a bridge between worlds, a reminder of the beauty of recognition and the extraordinary power of two simple words. Good Boy had transformed a courtroom, and in that transformation, Emily and Rex had created something unforgettable. The courtroom had settled again after the quiet storm of Emily's words. Lawyers resumed their arguments, witnesses continued their testimonies, and the judge, though professional and reserved, carried a faint, almost imperceptible warmth in her demeanor. Yet, amid all the formality and structure, a subtle change had occurred. A gentle, undeniable bond had formed between a 3-year-old girl and a police dog, one that could not be ignored. Even those who had initially thought Emily's actions were merely cute now felt the quiet power of what had just unfolded. Emily remained perched on her mother's lap, her small hand lightly gripping her stuffed bunny. Her eyes, wide with curiosity, never left Rex. She had discovered something profound, the power of presence. The dog, trained to respond to commands and maintain composure under any circumstance, had responded instinctively to her gentle praise. It was not the training that had created this moment. It was a pure, unspoken understanding. Emily had reached across the boundaries of age, species, and formal procedure to communicate something only the most attentive could perceive: admiration, recognition, and trust. Officer Daniels observed the interaction quietly, kneeling slightly to keep Rex at ease. Years of experience had taught him that K-9 units were remarkable creatures, intelligent, disciplined, and capable of sensing human emotion, but few interactions ever felt this intimate. Rex's gaze, usually so focused on his handler or his environment, softened slightly as he observed Emily. There was recognition there, not of authority or command, but of genuine appreciation. The dog understood that the praise was authentic, a simple acknowledgement from an innocent heart. This subtle response, almost imperceptible to anyone not paying close attention, reflected a profound truth: empathy transcends words. Emily's mother, Sarah, whispered gently to her daughter, "He likes you, Emily. He really does." Emily's tiny face lit up with a grin, her fascination deepening. She leaned forward slightly, as if to bridge the physical space between herself and the dog, and whispered another soft, "Good boy." Rex's tail flicked lightly, and he exhaled a calm, measured breath, as if the weight of her words had reached him in ways far beyond instruction. The gentle rhythm of their interaction created a small sanctuary in the courtroom, a space where innocence, loyalty, and empathy intertwined. The spectators in the courtroom, previously focused on the legal proceedings, began to notice the unique connection. Some whispered quietly to one another, marveling at the subtle shifts in Rex's behavior. Others nodded knowingly, recalling their own experiences with pets and the uncanny way animals could sense moods and emotions. Lawyers continued their discussions, but even they occasionally glanced at the interaction, a slight smile tugging at the corner of their lips. Emily's innocence had injected warmth into the room, a gentle reminder that even in spaces dominated by rules and protocol, empathy could leave a profound mark. Emily's imagination ran wild. She pictured Rex on patrol outside the courtroom, racing through parks and neighborhoods, sniffing out danger, protecting citizens, and responding instantly to Officer Daniels' commands. In her mind, he was a hero, brave and tireless, yet capable of gentleness and understanding. She felt a deep respect for him, mingled with a sense of wonder. This dog, trained to face danger and uphold the law, had become a symbol of courage and kindness in her young eyes. And in return, he acknowledged her presence with quiet, dignified attention. Officer Daniels, aware of the significance of the moment, spoke quietly to a nearby officer. "This is rare," he said, his voice low. "Most children don't connect like this, and Rex, he's sensing it. He knows she's genuine." The other officer nodded, impressed. "It's remarkable," he whispered. "Even the judge and the lawyers don't notice it like we do, but the room feels lighter somehow." Indeed, the courtroom's tension had softened. Emily's simple words, paired with the attentive presence of Rex, created a ripple effect, touching adults' hearts and reminding them of something essential: the power of connection and the importance of recognizing it. Emily's fascination deepened as she continued to watch Rex. She studied the movement of his ears, the lift of his head, and the subtle way his tail responded to her presence. Each small gesture told a story, and Emily was a careful reader. She understood in a way that only a child could that courage did not always roar. It could also be silent, calm, and attentive. And she sensed that Rex possessed that courage in abundance. Her admiration was instinctive, sincere, and unwavering, and that sincerity created a bridge between her and the dog, one built entirely on mutual understanding and respect. The bond was further reinforced when Officer Daniels allowed a soft, unobtrusive interaction. He leaned slightly closer to Emily, giving a nod of acknowledgement, signaling that she was safe and welcome in this moment. Emily's eyes lit up as she realized that Rex was not only aware of her praise but also connected to her presence in a meaningful way. She whispered softly once more, "Good boy," and this time, her tone carried a sense of pride, joy, and deep recognition. Rex responded subtly but unmistakably, a flick of his tail and a calm, measured gaze that conveyed acknowledgement and trust. Across the courtroom, observers whispered quietly among themselves. "It's incredible," one adult murmured. "That child, she sees something in him that we all miss." Another nodded. "It's the human-dog connection. Animals can sense so much more than we give them credit for." Emily's actions had transformed what was otherwise a serious, tension-filled environment into one of quiet reflection and warmth. She had reminded everyone present that understanding, empathy, and genuine recognition are universal languages, ones that could bridge age, species, and circumstance. Sarah, Emily's mother, felt a mixture of pride, awe, and gratitude. She watched her daughter beam with delight, realizing that this small act of connection was teaching lessons far beyond what any adult could convey. "You're amazing, Emily," she whispered. Emily's face lit up with joy, but she remained focused, whispering another soft word of praise to Rex. The dog responded with calm attentiveness, creating a rhythm between them that was almost meditative, a quiet, shared language of respect, acknowledgement, and trust. In that moment, Emily and Rex had created a bond that transcended the formalities of the courtroom. Adults continued with their proceedings, yet the subtle warmth persisted, as if the presence of innocence and recognition had left an invisible mark. For Emily, the connection was immediate and natural, a result of her instinctive understanding of kindness and bravery. For Rex, the bond reflected a deep capacity to respond to emotion, a testament to the intelligence, empathy, and loyalty inherent in trained police dogs. Even as the session continued, the memory of Emily's gestures lingered. Judges, lawyers, and witnesses carried a quiet sense of wonder, occasionally glancing at the child and the dog and recalling the moment with a smile. The courtroom, once dominated by tension, was subtly infused with warmth, reflection, and recognition. Emily had taught them something vital: that connection, empathy, and acknowledgement are forces more powerful than the strictest rules, and that even a small voice, paired with innocence and sincerity, could leave a lasting impression. By the end of the morning session, Emily's fascination had matured into a quiet, unspoken friendship with Rex. She had discovered a profound truth: that gestures, words, and attention carried weight, capable of forging bonds across even the widest divides. Rex, trained to serve, protect, and remain disciplined under pressure, had acknowledged her presence, responded to her praise, and engaged with her in a way that left the room subtly transformed. What began as curiosity had blossomed into trust, respect, and a unique, enduring connection that no one in that courtroom would ever forget. By the afternoon, word of Emily's gesture had already begun to spread quietly through the courthouse. Lawyers and court staff whispered about the 3-year-old who had captivated the courtroom with a simple, heartfelt good boy. But it wasn't until a local journalist, present to cover the trial, snapped a photograph of Emily pointing at Rex that the story truly began to take flight. The photo captured the perfect moment. Emily's tiny hand extended, eyes wide with fascination, and Rex, sitting calmly with ears slightly perked, seemingly acknowledging her presence. The image was striking, not just for its cuteness, but for the quiet, emotional resonance it conveyed. The journalist, sensing something special, uploaded the photo to the newspaper's social media accounts along with a brief caption. 3-year-old praises police dog in courtroom captures hearts. Within minutes, it was shared hundreds of times. By the end of the day, thousands had liked, commented, and shared the story, enchanted by the innocence and sincerity of the moment. Many viewers remarked on the unusual setting, a serious courtroom, contrasting sharply with the light-hearted yet profound connection between a tiny child and a disciplined police dog. Social media buzzed with admiration, awe, and even a touch of nostalgia, as adults recalled the simple joy of their own childhood experiences with animals. Back in the courthouse, Sarah, Emily's mother, was both amused and overwhelmed by the attention. She had only been aware of her daughter's fascination in real time, never imagining it would resonate with people outside the room. "I just thought she liked dogs," Sarah whispered to Officer Daniels as they watched Emily giggle quietly at Rex's subtle tail flick. Daniels nodded knowingly, understanding fully the depth of what had occurred. "It's more than that," he said softly. "She's connected with him. That's something rare." Emily, oblivious to the growing online fame, continued to watch Rex with absolute focus. Each time she whispered a soft "good boy," the dog responded with subtle gestures, a tilt of the head, a slight lift of a paw, a flick of the tail. For Emily, these small signs of acknowledgement were thrilling. She had discovered the power of her own words, of her attention, and the simple act of praise had become an invisible bridge connecting her to another being in a profound way. It was a lesson she might not consciously understand yet, but it was imprinted on her young mind, that kindness and recognition were transformative. News outlets quickly picked up the story. Local television stations ran short segments showing the photo of Emily and Rex, highlighting the courtroom moment with interviews from witnesses and officers. Social media accounts were flooded with comments praising the child's innocence and Rex's calm, attentive demeanor. "This is exactly what the world needs," one comment read. "Pure joy and connection in a place usually filled with tension and seriousness." Another said, "Look at that dog. He's as noble as a superhero, and that little girl knows it." The story struck a chord, reminding viewers that sometimes the simplest gestures could have the greatest impact. Even in the legal community, the story became a talking point. Lawyers who had previously been focused solely on arguments and evidence began referencing the interaction, not as a distraction but as a reminder of human empathy. "We spend so much time focusing on procedure," one attorney remarked, "but that child reminded us what really matters: connection, recognition, and understanding." Court staff shared their own observations of Emily's unwavering attention to Rex, noting how the moment had subtly shifted the atmosphere in the room. Even the judge, who remained professional and composed throughout the trial, allowed herself a faint smile whenever she recalled the image. The city began to take notice. Social media accounts of local news outlets and community groups shared the story extensively. People commented not only on Emily's cuteness, but on the emotional resonance of the interaction. Many shared stories of their own pets, recalling moments when animals had sensed emotions humans failed to convey. Some viewers noted the irony. A formal courtroom, normally a place of strict rules and tense arguments, had been humanized and softened by a child's pure gesture. The story became a symbol of how innocence and empathy could disrupt even the most rigid of environments. Emily's fame, albeit small and local at first, brought unexpected opportunities. Local animal advocacy groups reached out to Officer Daniels, requesting details about Rex and the K-9 program. They wanted to highlight the story as an example of the unique bond between children and animals. School programs, social workers, and local nonprofits shared the story as an educational tool, emphasizing empathy, compassion, and the power of recognition. Emily herself remained blissfully unaware of the growing attention, fully absorbed in the silent dialogue she had created with Rex, her small words echoing far beyond what she could imagine. Officer Daniels, proud and a little bemused, spoke privately with Sarah about the impact. "This is bigger than the trial," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "People see your daughter and Rex and they feel something. They remember the innocence they've lost, the connections that are rare in their own lives. That two-word gesture changed the energy in the courtroom, and now it's touching the city." Sarah nodded, her eyes wide. She had always known Emily had a special bond with animals, but she never imagined it would resonate so widely. The story began reaching national media outlets within days. News stations aired segments featuring Emily's foe and interviews with Officer Daniels, highlighting Rex's training and gentle demeanor. Articles shared the narrative of a small child, a police dog, and a courtroom moment that reminded adults everywhere of the transformative power of innocence and connection. Social media accounts exploded with shares and hashtags, many calling the image the most wholesome courtroom story of the year. It was a rare case of something so small, so unassuming, sparking widespread admiration and joy. Emily's mother watched all of this unfold with a mixture of awe, pride, and disbelief. She held her daughter's hand as they read comments on their phones, showing her the reactions from people all over the country. Emily, delighted by the attention on Rex, squealed with joy every time she saw the dog on screen or in photos. She had unintentionally become part of a story that celebrated kindness, empathy, and the unique understanding between humans and dogs. It was a lesson Sarah knew would stay with her daughter for life. The idea that small actions, when sincere, could create ripples far beyond what anyone expected. Meanwhile, Rex, ever composed, remained the calm center of attention. The dog had become a silent celebrity, his role as a disciplined K-9 overshadowed momentarily by his gentle response to a child's praise. Officer Daniels noted subtle changes in Rex's behavior during subsequent duties. The dog seemed calmer, more attuned, almost as if the public recognition of his gentle nature had reinforced his own sense of purpose. In a small but meaningful way, Emily's words had not only impacted the courtroom and the public, but also strengthened the bond between Rex and his handler. By the end of the week, the story had permeated not just news outlets, but community conversations. Social media feeds were filled with photos, shared memories, and personal reflections inspired by Emily's two words. Parents shared anecdotes about teaching children empathy. Officers praised the narrative as a testament to the importance of K-9 units, and ordinary citizens marveled at how a simple act of recognition could create joy in the midst of seriousness. The story was more than viral. It was a reminder that compassion, innocence, and acknowledgement had the power to transform ordinary moments into something unforgettable. Through it all, Emily remained blissfully unaware of the attention she had sparked. For her, it was never about fame or recognition. It was about a connection she felt in her heart. She leaned toward Rex whenever possible, whispered her soft praises, and watched for the smallest gestures that indicated his acknowledgement. To Emily, that bond was the most important part of the day, and in that innocent focus, she had taught the world a lesson, that sincerity, kindness, and observation often matter more than words, rules, or procedure. The following week, The courthouse was buzzing not just with legal proceedings, but with stories of Emily and Rex circulating quietly among staff, visitors, and the press. What had begun as a simple courtroom moment, one small child pointing at a police dog and saying two words, had evolved into something far larger, a story that captured hearts and inspired reflection. Every new visitor, from attorneys to reporters, seemed to carry with them an echo of the tale, asking questions, sharing reactions, or simply nodding knowingly. Emily remained blissfully unaware of her growing fame. She arrived at the courthouse as usual, her small fingers clutching her beloved stuffed bunny, her eyes scanning for Rex. The dog, sitting quietly beside Officer Daniels, seemed to recognize the continuity of their connection. Emily's gaze met his, and she squealed softly, her joy unrestrained. Rex's ears twitched, tail flicking subtly, acknowledging the same bond they had begun to form weeks ago. Though the courtroom was still serious, Emily had transformed it into a space that radiated warmth, a small yet undeniable testament to the power of innocence and empathy. Word had spread through the city. Local schools shared the story in classrooms, illustrating lessons about kindness, recognition, and empathy. Teachers spoke of Emily's courage to express admiration, even in a formal setting, and how a simple, heartfelt gesture could influence not only those around you but an entire room. Parents and children alike found inspiration in her example, discussing the importance of acknowledging others' efforts, whether human or animal. The tale of Emily and Rex became more than just a viral moment. It became a teaching tool, a reminder of fundamental values often overshadowed by everyday busyness. Officer Daniels noticed subtle changes in Rex's behavior as well. The dog, already highly disciplined, seemed calmer, more attuned to the subtle emotions around him, and even more responsive to human interactions. He seemed to sense the joy and admiration Emily brought into the room, responding with quiet gestures, slight shifts in posture, gentle tail flicks, and focused attention. To Daniels, it was a remarkable phenomenon. A small child, with no formal understanding of canine psychology, had created a bond that enhanced both Rex's performance and his emotional connection with humans. Emily's mother, Sarah, was both amazed and deeply proud. She watched her daughter interact with Rex, whispering the same soft praises and gestures they had developed over the past week. Sarah marveled at the depth of understanding her child displayed, and how it inspired adults to pause and reflect. Conversations in the courthouse corridors frequently turned toward Emily, with staff and visitors discussing not only her innocence but the larger meaning behind her words. "It's incredible," one clerk said. "A 3-year-old can teach us all about compassion and recognition. Sometimes the smallest gestures matter most." Local news stations returned to the courthouse to interview Officer Daniels and capture footage of Rex, while Emily quietly watched from her mother's lap. The footage was broadcast the same evening, reaching thousands more households. Families across the city saw the calm, majestic German Shepherd, the tiny child pointing, and the simple words, "Good boy." Social media erupted anew with commentary, reflections, and praise. People shared their own experiences with pets, their memories of childhood innocence, and the extraordinary way in which a single moment could unite disparate groups in admiration and delight. Emily, entirely unconcerned with her public recognition, remained focused on the connection that mattered most. She leaned slightly forward, offering soft praises and gentle gestures toward Rex, who responded with his calm attentiveness. Every glance, tilt of the head, and subtle tail flick reinforced the bond they were forming. Though the world outside had become captivated by this simple exchange, Emily and Rex shared a private understanding that recognition and kindness were powerful, and that trust and empathy could be felt without the need for grand gestures or words. The courthouse itself seemed changed. The serious atmosphere, previously dominated by rules, tension, and procedure, now carried traces of warmth and reflection. Lawyers who had been engaged in intense debate softened their tones when glancing at Emily. Witnesses recounted testimony with a new calmness, and staff moved with subtle smiles, all touched by the ongoing story of a child and her dog. The ripple effect extended beyond the courtroom, touching each person who encountered it, a gentle reminder of the universality of empathy and connection. Emily's story even reached local city officials, who invited Officer Daniels and Rex to community events, emphasizing lessons about children, animals, and emotional intelligence. Emily accompanied her mother on some of these visits, always eager to see Rex respond to the attention and admiration she offered. Each interaction reinforced the bond they had formed in the courtroom, while simultaneously inspiring new audiences to recognize the simple power of connection. Families, educators, and children alike marveled at the profound effect of a 3-year-old's simple words and gestures. The narrative soon took on a life of its own. Social media posts were shared, articles written, and photographs circulated widely. Emily and Rex became symbolic of more than just innocence. They represented trust, recognition, and the subtle yet transformative power of kindness. People commented on how extraordinary it was that a child could influence the mood of an entire courtroom, and by extension, capture the hearts of an entire community. For many, the story reminded them to pause, to notice the small acts of courage and recognition around them, and to appreciate the quiet heroes, whether human or animal, that often go unseen. Even Emily began to sense the joy she brought to others, albeit in her simple, childlike way. She laughed quietly when adults smiled at her, whispered soft praises to Rex during public appearances, and leaned into her mother's gentle guidance. She did not understand the full extent of her growing fame or the viral attention her actions had sparked, but she felt the warmth of approval, both from Rex and from the world around her. In her innocence, she had discovered an extraordinary truth: that connection, kindness, and empathy were powerful forces capable of leaving lasting impressions. Officer Daniels, watching this unfold, marveled at the emotional resonance. He had seen countless children interact with police dogs, but none had created such a profound, lasting bond, nor had any sparked such widespread public reaction. Rex, calm and dignified, responded naturally to the attention, yet it was clear that the dog had been profoundly affected by Emily's pure recognition. The two shared a subtle understanding, a silent dialogue of trust and admiration that no photograph or video could fully capture. By the end of the week, Emily and Rex's story had permeated nearly every corner of the community. Local newspapers featured interviews, social media buzzed with commentary, and families discussed the unexpected lesson of empathy and recognition. The courtroom itself remained a central symbol of the tale, a place of seriousness transformed momentarily by a small child's gentle words. Emily had created something extraordinary, a lasting reminder that even in structured, high-pressure environments, innocence, attention, and kindness could leave an indelible mark. And through it all, the bond between Emily and Rex continued to deepen. Each glance, tail flick, and soft word strengthened their connection, reinforcing the lesson that had begun in the courtroom, that even the smallest gestures could bridge worlds, teach profound truths, and inspire hearts far beyond the immediate space. In the eyes of those who witnessed it, Emily and Rex had become more than child and dog. They had become symbols of hope, empathy, and the quiet yet transformative power of recognition. By the following morning, the story of Emily and Rex had fully captured the hearts of the city. Social media posts continued to circulate, featuring photos of the tiny girl pointing at the majestic police dog with a soft smile, whispering her gentle praise. Television news anchors shared the tale with warmth in their voices, and print articles praised the innocence, sincerity, and power of a simple, heartfelt gesture. But beyond the attention and headlines, something far more enduring had taken root, a quiet, profound reminder of the bonds that could exist between humans and animals, and the extraordinary ways that a child's kindness could touch everyone around her. Emily arrived at the courthouse again, her stuffed bunny clutched tightly in her small hands. To her, this was routine, a chance to see Rex. She did not fully grasp the public fascination with her actions, nor did she understand the media frenzy surrounding her. In her mind, she was simply visiting a friend, a loyal, brave, and gentle presence she had come to admire deeply. The courtroom, usually filled with tension, felt warmer today. Even the judge, attending to her official duties, allowed her eyes to linger for a brief moment on the pair who had transformed the atmosphere so remarkably weeks ago. Rex, as always, was calm and attentive. His posture was disciplined yet relaxed, ears pricked subtly, tail resting lightly on the polished floor. When Emily's gaze met his, the dog's eyes seemed to acknowledge her presence with something beyond training or instinct: recognition, understanding, and trust. Officer Daniels, kneeling quietly at his side, allowed the interaction to continue, sensing the deep significance of this bond. Over the weeks, he had witnessed countless public interactions with K-9 units, but few carried such sincerity or left such an emotional imprint. This was rare, extraordinary, a moment that would linger far beyond the walls of the courthouse. Emily leaned forward slightly, pointing once more, whispering her soft, familiar words. "Good boy." Her voice, though quiet, was imbued with pride and joy. Rex's tail flicked once in acknowledgement, his ears twitching toward her, his eyes locking briefly with hers. There was a rhythm in their interaction, almost meditative, built over weeks of subtle gestures and soft praises. To Emily, this was not an audience or a story, it was connection. And Rex responded with unwavering attentiveness, the kind only the most disciplined and emotionally aware dogs could display. News crews had returned to capture additional footage, broadcasting Emily's continuing bond with Rex to an audience now fully captivated by the story. Interviews with Officer Daniels highlighted the training, discipline, and emotional intelligence of the K-9 unit, while also emphasizing the human side, the ways in which animals could sense emotions, form connections, and respond to genuine kindness. Social media posts flooded the internet once more, this time not just featuring the photograph, but short videos showing the quiet, unfolding relationship between a child and a dog. Comments poured in: admiration, reflections on childhood, and personal stories of pets who had provided similar lessons of empathy and understanding. Emily's mother, Sarah, watched with a mixture of pride and amazement. She had always known her daughter had a special affinity for animals, but the scale and depth of public response were extraordinary. She smiled as Emily whispered another soft, "good boy" to Rex, the child's innocence radiating from her small form. It was a reminder, Sarah thought, that the simplest gestures could resonate far beyond immediate comprehension. Emily was teaching, inspiring, and touching hearts, not with grand speeches or elaborate performances, but with unfiltered, authentic kindness. The courtroom staff, too, had been touched. Judges, clerks, and attorneys alike paused to watch the small interactions, sharing quiet smiles and subtle nods. The energy in the room, once heavy with tension and procedural strictness, was now suffused with warmth. Witnesses arrived to testify but found themselves influenced by the underlying current of compassion in the room, inspired by the knowledge that even in structured, serious settings, genuine human and canine connection could flourish. Emily and Rex had transformed the environment in ways no one could have anticipated. The story reached city officials, who invited Emily and Rex to participate in community events promoting kindness, safety, and education about K-9 units. Emily, always shy but joyful in Rex's presence, attended small gatherings, schools, and community centers. Each time her small gestures, soft praises, pointing, or gentle smiles, elicited delighted reactions from children and adults alike. They saw in Emily the embodiment of sincerity and courage, while Rex demonstrated calm, disciplined attentiveness that inspired admiration. Together, they became symbols of empathy, trust, and the quiet power of recognition. Locally, Emily's story inspired acts of kindness and awareness of emotional intelligence. Schools shared the tale in classrooms, teaching students the value of observation, praise, and gentle acknowledgement. Animal advocacy groups highlighted the importance of understanding pets, while police departments across the state shared the story as an example of community engagement and the human side of law enforcement. Emily, through her simple words and gestures, had created a legacy, a story that reminded people of the importance of seeing, acknowledging, and appreciating those around us. Even months later, the bond between Emily and Rex remained extraordinary. Each visit to the courthouse or community event reinforced their connection. Emily learned to recognize subtle cues from Rex, while Rex responded with the calm attentiveness he had displayed since the first courtroom encounter. The story, while it began with a fleeting moment of praise, had become a living testament to the transformative power of innocence and empathy. Adults who witnessed the interactions remembered it vividly, often recounting the story to friends, family, and colleagues as an example of how small gestures could ripple outward, affecting people far beyond the immediate moment. Sarah reflected on how this journey had changed both her daughter and their community. Emily's simple praise, delivered with sincerity and warmth, had sparked conversations, inspired media coverage, and touched hearts far beyond what anyone could have predicted. "She didn't realize it at the time," Sarah said softly to Officer Daniels, "but she created something lasting. She taught everyone around her, and even people who have never met her, what true kindness looks like." Daniels nodded, watching Rex respond to Emily's subtle cues. "It's rare," he said, "for something so small to have such a big impact, but that's the magic of connection." The final courtroom session concluded not with tension or debate, but with a quiet sense of warmth. Emily had whispered her familiar praises to Rex, who had responded with attentive gestures, and the adults present could not help but feel changed. They understood in their own ways that the story was more than a viral moment. It was a demonstration of the enduring power of recognition, trust, and empathy. Emily's two words had altered the dynamic of the room, leaving an invisible legacy that would be remembered long after the gavel had fallen and the trial concluded. As the story continued to circulate online and in the media, Emily and Rex became symbols of hope, innocence, and the deep bonds possible between humans and animals. People shared their own experiences, inspired to offer praise, attention, and gentle acknowledgement to those around them. Teachers, parents, officers, and citizens carried Emily's lesson forward, that even a small voice, paired with sincere intention, could ripple outward, leaving lasting, meaningful impressions on the world. Emily herself, unaware of the magnitude of her impact, simply felt joy and pride in seeing Rex respond. She whispered once more, "Good boy," and the dog's tail flicked gently, ears pricked attentively, and eyes locked on hers. In that moment, nothing else mattered. No headlines, no media coverage, no fame. It was a simple, perfect exchange. A child's acknowledgement met with a dog's quiet recognition. And in that connection, the world had glimpsed something extraordinary. The purity, power, and beauty of innocence, kindness, and mutual respect. As Emily skipped from the courtroom that day, clutching her bunny and waving to Rex, her mother followed, smiling. The city buzzed with the story of a girl and her dog who had reminded everyone of what truly mattered. And while many would read, watch, and share the tale, Emily and Rex would forever share something deeper, a bond forged in trust, strengthened through gentle words, and celebrated quietly but powerfully in the hearts of all who had witnessed it. The story, once a fleeting courtroom moment, had become timeless, a reminder that even the smallest voices can create monumental change, and that the connections formed between humans and animals are among the most profound lessons life can offer. Emily and Rex had taught the world in just a few words and gestures that recognition, kindness, and empathy are not just virtues. They are forces capable of shaping hearts, minds, and communities in ways that endure forever.